Hey everybody, welcome back to the next part in my Creating a Great Tone series for our Line 6 Helix. Today I wanted to do a quick video. It's not going to be any playing or tones in this one, so just to let everybody know, it's just more of a discussion about the global EQ. I've had so many questions over the last, well, quite a lengthy time. People asking me, how do you use the global EQ? Do you have your global EQ on? Do you have it off? When do you use it? How do you use it? And I just wanted to address that because I think some folks who are new to the Helix, or even some folks who've been using it for a while, kind of maybe view the global EQ in a manner that it wasn't really meant to be used in, if that makes any sense. And I don't want to say that what I'm saying here is carved in stone, and the things I'm saying are the only way we can view the global EQ. I just want to give my thoughts as to, I think, what the main intention or intent of Line 6 was in adding the global EQ into the Line 6 Helix, okay? Because I think a lot of people use it when they probably should just be creating their patch or their preset in a different way, rather than relying on the global EQ. And here's why. First of all, let's do this. Let's go over to our screen here and check out the Line 6 Helix owner's manual. So many folks, it's a fairly lengthy read, right? But a lot of folks just don't tend to look into it at all. But let's see what it says under the global EQ page heading in the Line 6 owner's manual. Here's how Line 6 describes its purpose, okay? The Helix device's global EQ has 3 fully parametric bands plus variable low and high cut filters and is used for compensating for the wide disparity in acoustic environments on tour or in traveling from studio to studio. Global EQ is applied to all set lists and presets and can be heard from the 1/4-inch outputs or XLR outputs or both. Note, global EQ is never heard from send digital or USB outputs. Okay, so notice they didn't really talk about it as being a tone shaper for our presets or anything along those lines, right? It's more, I guess I would call it a corrective EQ for instances where all of our presets that we've dialed in are having an issue because of maybe a new speaker we're plugged into, a new set of monitors we're plugged into, front of house monitors, a particular environment, acoustic environment, a different room, right? Let me give you some examples. Let's say that I've dialed all my presets in at home on, say, my studio monitors, right? And I think they just sound amazing. But I now get to a gig and maybe I'm just running my Helix and I'm getting my monitor sounds just from the stage monitors. And it's a completely different sound than what I'm used to from my studio monitors. Maybe everything is very bright. Maybe it's very boomy all of a sudden. Maybe it's very muddy, whatever that is. And I notice that no matter what preset I go through, they all share that same brightness or muddiness or boominess or whatever the problem area is. Well, instead of having to go into each individual preset and tweak that particular preset and then go to the next one and tweak it and the next one and tweak it, if the general problem is the same across all the presets, it's very likely because either my listening environment that I dialed them in with, there was an issue with it, and now this new environment is exposing that issue, or maybe my environment was fine, but this new acoustic environment is causing the issue. Whatever, it doesn't matter. We now have an easy way to just sort of say, hey, all my presets are boomy. I'm going to go in and I'm going to apply, a low cut, or I'm going to pull some bass out of it, or they're too bright. I'm going to put a high cut, or I'm going to cut some of the high mids. Whatever the problem might be, we now have a way to fix it across all of our presets just like that, without having to deep dive into each preset and make a million tweaks, which, would be almost impossible in a gig or live situation. Maybe I dialed it in on my FR speaker at home at a very low volume. And then when I get out to the gig and I crank the volume up, I find that maybe now it sounds too harsh, right? Okay, I can go, and all my presets sound too harsh, right? I can go to my global EQ and correct that across all my presets and be up and running for that environment and for a different speaker or whatever else we have. So I hope that makes sense. Now, what are some of the downsides to using the global EQ as sort of a main tone shaper for our presets? Well, some folks have a workflow that works for them and they use their global EQ, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to tell you you can't use it that way. I'm just sort of trying to clear up some of the misconceptions about it, you know? So if you have a workflow where you find that, you know, this same global EQ applied across all your presets works beautifully, that's great, go for it, you know? The problem with that is if you ever to share that preset, maybe on custom tone, maybe you're somebody who's looking into sell presets, right? For others to purchase. You know, those are a couple examples of times now where you're going to dial in a preset, it's going to have a certain sound for you. You export that, you put it on custom tone, or you share it with somebody else, or somebody else purchases it off you, they're going to be getting a very, very different tone because you dialed this tone in with this global EQ filter on, which doesn't export with the file, the preset, right? So they're going to be getting that and not hearing an accurate representation of what that preset sounded like simply because it's not going through that global EQ filter that we had, right? So you can see some of the potential problems with using the global EQ sort of as a tone shaper for a particular preset. Now, I've had a lot of folks ask me, you know, if you always are doing high and low cut at whatever frequency points, why don't you just put it in the global EQ, right? And what I just explained is one of the reasons why I wouldn't. The other is because of what Line 6 themselves say in the manual, that the USB outputs don't use it, right? So here's another problem, right? Let's say we dial in a preset that we love and we're playing it live, but we want to also use it for recording. But when we're at home, we're recording with the Helix as a USB audio device, audio interface into our computer. Now that preset is not going to be going through that global EQ anymore, and it's going to have a very different sound if we're always used to playing it or if we've dialed it in using the global EQ, if that makes sense, right? So all of a sudden now we'd have to apply another EQ just like the global EQ into our preset to get it to work with the USB outs, right? So the global EQ is not going to be much use to that. Now, for me personally, I use in my studio here, when I'm doing Helix videos, when I'm recording albums, when I'm doing session work, I have almost always the Helix set up as my USB audio interface when I'm recording guitars. I also have sitting right here a UAD Apollo Twin, which is a secondary interface I use. A lot of times when I'm mixing, I'll throw that on, maybe use some of the plugins from that. But as far as the Helix goes, I use that as my audio interface a lot. So the global EQs have absolutely no use to me on that. So that's why I wouldn't just apply, you know, cuts or boosts that I may use regularly to the global EQ. It's not going to do me any good in the studio, right? If that makes any sense. Let's dive back over to HX Edit here for a second. I'll just show you, here's my Robin Ford preset I made the other day. So if we just go up to our window pull down menu here, we see the global EQ and that'll pop up right here. Now an interesting thing is we can apply that to either the 1/4 inch outputs, the XLR outputs, or both. Now you might say, well, why would I want that option? Well, let's say that we have a preset dialed in exactly the way we like it sounding, ready to go to front of house, and obviously a sound man's going to have his ability to do his magic on that to get it work with the mix. That's his job, right? But let's say we're plugged into our monitoring solution on stage, right? And let's just say that the XLR outs are going to front of house and the 1/4 inch outs are going to our on-stage monitoring solution, whether it be an FR/FR, a power cab, a Mission Gemini, or a head rush, any million of the ones available. So if we're feeding that with the 1/4 inch and we get to the gig and we realize, hey, wait a second, you know, the front of the house man, he's happy. He's going, this is great. But on stage, maybe it's boomy, muddy. Maybe we're not cutting enough. Maybe it's too bright. Who knows, right? So what do we do? Well, what we can do is simply apply the global EQ just to the 1/4 inch outs. Now, if our stage monitoring solution is set up with the 1/4 inch outs, then it's going to apply the global EQ only to that. The front of house is still going to get theirs, and everything is going to work out perfectly fine, if that makes sense to you guys, okay? And then again, you know, here we have the ability to low cut, we have the ability to high cut, and then we have 3 parametric bands that we have adjustable bandwidth or Q, right, our gain, and we can set the frequency. So how might I set this live if I was having a problem with it being too muddy? You know, maybe I would apply a low cut around 100 hertz. Maybe I would come in around 400 hertz with a, you know, fairly broad EQ. Maybe pull that up to maybe 1.4 and pull a couple dB out of that, and then maybe come up into 2.5K, same sort of Q, and give it a little gentle boost. You know, something like that might help to get rid of some boominess. And then if it's too harsh, maybe we start high cutting a little bit, right? It depends. It's hard to say exactly how we would use this in every situation because every situation is going to be so different, okay? So there's just a few words about the global EQ. It's a question I should have answered a long time ago. I get that question a lot in the forums on my YouTube channel, in emails, Facebook messages. I get kind of bombarded with global EQ questions. So the short answer is I don't use it. I've never used the global EQ because I've had no need to. My presets I dial in, I have a pretty good feeling of how they're going to translate in the studio and live. So when I've played live with the Helix or the Stomp, my presets work the way I want them to. And I have no need for the global EQ. Will I ever? I may. You know, I may have a need for it at some point. I know it's there. I know how to use it. If I need it, it's there. And that's kind of the way I've always thought of it as being used. It's there to help us in the case of being in a situation where all of our presets aren't working because of a particular acoustic problem. It gives us that sort of tool to go in and fix it across all of our presets, okay? So any questions about that, please leave them. I hope that clears up sort of my views on it and what the views of, I think, even Line 6 had when they were implementing this, as is pointed out in the manual. All right. Again, my opinion, like I said, other people are going to have a different workflow, or maybe the global EQ is a huge part of it, and that's wonderful. And keep doing it, because if you find a way, the beauty of the Helix is it's so flexible, so many possibilities with it that, you know, one person can't possibly think of all the workflows, and there's no right and wrong with this. So that's the beauty of it. If you found a way to work with it that's different than even the original intended purpose, run with it and go with it. Whatever makes things work for you, sound best for you, and give you the quickest workflow to get us doing what's important, which is playing music, right? And sounding as good as we can. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, I'll be back soon with some more content. Like the video, share it if you don't mind, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out some of my preset packs on Line 6 Marketplace. I'm going to be adding some more to that soon. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Ciao for now.